task should you choose to accept is to identify different file types. When we looked before at using ls-ld to look at GTC directory, we could see the very leftmost character was a D, indicating that this is a directory. Everything within Linux is some form of file. This even includes the devices. When I type TTY, we're looking then at the terminal that I have connected to, and it's pseudo terminal 1. If we ls-l to get a long listing of /dev/pts/1, we can see then that this is a character device, something that can accept character input and display those characters. We can run this in a shorter way if I use ls-l to get a long listing, but I want to look at the output of the tty command. So where we are using the brackets like this, we evaluate the contents of the brackets first and then pass that through to ls-l. We can see then that we get exactly the same output, but we have just been able to combine the two commands together into the one line. Control L, remember it's going to clear my screen. If I use the command ls and then block, we can see then the block devices that I have on my system. The block devices are the disks and partitions. We can see then that we have got SDA as a disk and SDA1 as a partition. Again, let me clear this out. They exist within the dev directory. So ls/dev/sd. Then if we use A, we get then the device file. Of course, running it as a long listing, we should see that this is a block device. So it starts with B. We can also, while list, we're here running our listing. If I want to look at SDA and its partitions, I can then use the star. The star then is going to show me SDA and anything that follows, including 0 characters. We will list SDA, but also then SDA1 and SDA2. The star character is a white star in Linux that represents 0 or more characters. If I did this a question mark, then we're looking at SDA followed by a single character. No longer do we see SDA. It has to be SDA followed by a single character. So if I did this, even though it's not going to list any differently, we are saying SDA followed by 1 or 2. It's not looking for SDA12. It's looking for SDA1 or SDA2. Of course, then it's a listing the same as we saw before because I only have those 2 partitions, but the device files that we're looking at are located then within the /dev directory. When we were looking at our system release or the version that we were using before, if we did an ls-l on /etc/system-release, we can see then that shows us a symbolic link, and it's pointing through to the file CentOS-release. Again, if I go through and include in the output /etc/CentOS-release, what I am also going to do is to put a third file in here, /etc/redhat-release. We have got 3 files. The arguments that we are providing to ls-l are the 3 files: system-release, CentOS-release, and redhat-release. When I clear the screen with Control L and then enter the commands, we can see that we have got one real file, and that's the CentOS release file. Look at the starting character in the metadata. It's a regular file, so it's just minus. Then we can see the metadata for Red Hat release and the metadata for system release. There are both links. They're shown as A. These are symbolic links. We can also include in the metadata where they are actually pointing to. They're both pointing through to the CentOS-release file. It doesn't matter which file that I read. If I go through and take a look at /etc/redhat and then -release, we can see then that reads then the CentOS release file for me. We could also get this with LSP release. If I use say -d for the description, we can see then that shows me that it's CentOS Linux release and it's 7.3, and then I get the building number 16.11. The LSP release file is a binary file, a program that we installed. If we go through and do an ls-ls, we will get a long listing on then wish LSP release. Remember, that's the command that we are running. We are going to run the command wish against that. That's going to list the full path through to that file. We see then that's /user/bin/lsp release. When we look at that, we can see that it's shown as green, indicating that it's an executable. It shows as a regular file. It's not any particular file type, but if I use the F to show the file type, so we can see that it's executable. We can see the asterisk shows against it. If I wanted to identify which package put this on, using a CentOS system, we have a package manager. We will see more on our software package manager later. We could use the RPM and Q and F for query file. The RPM can be used to install packages, and our packages are RPM file types. But also it adds the files into a database. We can query the database for the file, of course. I can just type in /user/bin/lsp release. We can see that comes from the Red Hat LSP core package that we put on when we were running our installations. But again, working with the same principles of our shortcut, we can then go through and up arrow key and use rpm and -query file. It's going to be the output of wish LSP release. There's a lot of shortcuts that we really should make use of when working at the command line. To be honest, we should be seeing this throughout the course because it's something that we could use on day in, day out basis when managing our Linux system. Really, it's all about using Linux, which is the beauty of this exam that you're going to get, both with the Red Hat Certified System Administrator as well as your Linux Foundation Certified Sysadmin. They are all practical, all life-based exam where you have to carry out the exam on the system. So the better you know how to navigate the system and work quickly with the system, the better. In the next video, we're going to be taking a look at how we can start working with some of our files. See you in the next video.